The silence inside Clarence House that evening did not feel ordinary. Even veteran aides who had survived decades of royal turbulence reportedly avoided eye contact as Princess Anne walked through the corridor carrying a sealed red folder no one had seen before. Sources close to palace staff whisper that what unfolded behind those closed doors was not merely another family disagreement, it was the beginning of a brutal reckoning tied to Prince Louis, a forgotten promise from Prince Philip, and a royal patronage powerful enough to reshape the monarchy's future. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What made the atmosphere even more unsettling was the speed with which senior advisors were summoned that night. Palace schedules were allegedly cleared without explanation. Staff members who normally moved freely through private royal offices were suddenly instructed to remain outside designated corridors. And at the center of it all stood Princess Anne, a figure long respected inside the monarchy for her loyalty to tradition and her refusal to participate in royal theatrics. Insiders now claim Anne arrived carrying more than documents. She arrived carrying leverage. Because hidden inside that sealed folder, according to whispers emerging from within palace walls, was evidence of Prince Philip's deeply personal wish regarding the future direction of the younger royals, particularly Prince Louis. The rumors exploded quietly at first. A symbolic royal patronage tied to Prince Philip's legacy had allegedly been discussed for months behind closed doors, but few expected Louis to become the chosen figure connected to it. Many believed the honor would eventually pass through older members of the family, perhaps even through channels more closely aligned with King Charles's carefully managed vision of a modern monarchy. Instead, the alleged decision surrounding Louis reportedly blindsided several senior figures within the institution. The timing alone raised alarm. Palace insiders claim discussions about legacy protection had intensified after private concerns emerged over whether Prince Philip's values of discipline, restraint, and duty were slowly fading beneath growing public relations strategies and shifting power circles. And according to sources familiar with those meetings, Princess Anne became increasingly determined to ensure Philip's influence would survive through someone she believed represented continuity rather than performance. That was when Prince William reportedly entered the conflict in a far more emotional state than many had ever witnessed publicly. Witnesses allegedly saw him leaving the confidential meeting late that evening looking tense, exhausted, and visibly shaken. One insider even described him as carrying the weight of 2 generations at once. Because beneath the headlines and ceremonial language surrounding patronages lies something far more dangerous inside royal life: symbolism. Every title, every appearance, every endorsement sends a message about who matters next. And if Louis had truly been selected for a patronage connected to Prince Philip's legacy, the implications stretched far beyond a simple family tribute. It hinted at a deliberate repositioning of influence toward William and Catherine's side of the monarchy, at a moment when internal alliances already appeared increasingly fragile. What reportedly deepened the anxiety inside royal circles was the reaction from Queen Camilla's inner circle. Sources claim several longtime supporters surrounding the Queen viewed the move as more than sentimental. They allegedly feared it represented a quiet consolidation of public affection and institutional loyalty around the younger generation, especially the Wales family. For years, palace observers have whispered about competing visions for the monarchy's future existing beneath the surface of official unity. One side focused on modernization and controlled public messaging. The other remained fiercely protective of older royal traditions tied to service, sacrifice, and inherited responsibility. And suddenly, Prince Louis, a child largely kept away from political symbolism, found himself at the center of a storm neither he nor the public fully understood yet. But what made this patronage truly explosive was not the title itself, it was the hidden royal message buried beneath it. One that reached back to Prince Philip's final wishes. For years, Prince Louis was viewed as the cheerful youngest royal, the child whose laughter softened tense public appearances and whose playful moments distracted from the growing fractures inside the House of Windsor. But according to various interpretations circulating among royal observers, the palace may have quietly been preparing him for something far more serious. Behind the smiles and public celebrations, an older generation of royals reportedly believed Louis carried echoes of Prince Philip's resilience, discipline, and deeply guarded sense of duty. That belief, once dismissed as sentimental palace gossip, has now become the center of an increasingly intense conversation unfolding behind closed royal doors. Because insiders claim this was never simply about affection for the youngest Wales child. It was about survival. The survival of a royal philosophy many feared was slowly disappearing beneath modern pressures, public relations campaigns, and internal struggles over what the monarchy should become in the years ahead. Those concerns reportedly intensified long before the alleged patronage discussions became known. Royal historians and long-time palace figures have quietly pointed to striking similarities between Prince Louis and a young Prince Philip, not in appearance, but in temperament. Philip himself was often described as restless, sharp-willed, and emotionally guarded beneath a public image that rarely revealed the full weight he carried. He valued endurance over applause, duty over popularity, silence over performance. And according to whispers now circulating through royal circles, some senior royals began noticing traces of that same quiet strength in Louis from an unusually early age. While the public saw harmless childhood energy, insiders allegedly saw composure forming beneath it. They saw confidence without calculation, presence without ambition. Traits Prince Philip reportedly admired deeply in those he trusted most. That perspective allegedly became even more significant as debates surrounding the monarchy's future grew increasingly tense. Discussions about preserving traditional royal values were no longer abstract conversations held among historians and advisors. They became urgent. Palace insiders claim fears had been building for years that the institution's older foundations discipline, national service, sacrifice, and restraint were slowly weakening under the weight of celebrity culture and modern image management. Some believed the monarchy risked losing the very qualities that once gave it stability during moments of national uncertainty. And according to several royal commentators, Princess Anne emerged as one of the strongest defenders of those traditional ideals. Fiercely loyal to her father's worldview, Anne reportedly became deeply protective of Louis's future role inside the monarchy, particularly as conversations surrounding Prince Philip's legacy intensified after his passing. What made those discussions even more explosive was the alleged connection between the patronage itself and institutions tied to military discipline, conservation, and public service traditions long associated with Philip's personal identity. Royal historians now suggest the symbolism may have been deliberate. Prince Philip spent decades championing causes built around endurance, environmental responsibility, leadership training, and service to country rather than self-interest. If Louis had truly been chosen to inherit a symbolic piece of that legacy, the message carried enormous weight inside palace walls. It suggested that certain senior figures were already thinking generations ahead, quietly shaping which royal values would survive long after today's power struggles faded away. But with every shift inside the monarchy comes resistance. And according to insiders, not everyone welcomed the growing belief that Louis represented continuity with the old royal order. Some reportedly feared that elevating symbols tied to Prince Philip's influence could strengthen factions loyal to William, Catherine, and Princess Anne, while weakening others competing for relevance around King Charles's reign. What appeared publicly as a heartfelt tribute to a beloved grandfather may, behind closed doors, have carried the force of a warning, a declaration that the battle over the monarchy's future was no longer theoretical. It had already begun. And while the public saw a symbolic gesture honoring a beloved grandfather, insiders suggest the move triggered panic within factions already fighting for influence around the king. Reports suggest the announcement did not land peacefully inside royal circles. Behind the polished smiles and carefully controlled press briefings, tensions allegedly erupted over what Prince Louis's new position truly represented. Some palace insiders reportedly viewed it as a ceremonial tribute. Others interpreted it as something much larger, a signal that Princess Anne and Prince William were quietly shaping the monarchy's future without waiting for permission from competing royal factions. What made the situation especially volatile was the growing belief that the decision had not emerged from the king's traditional advisory structure at all. Instead, whispers inside palace corridors suggested a smaller, more private alliance had already begun forming around the future of the Wales children, particularly during a period when uncertainty surrounding King Charles's health had intensified fears about the monarchy's long-term stability. According to royal insiders, senior aides became sharply divided over how much authority the younger generation should gradually inherit, while Charles still remained on the throne. Some argued the institution needed careful continuity planning before another crisis destabilized public confidence. Others reportedly feared those discussions were accelerating too quickly, creating dangerous perceptions of shifting power behind the scenes. And at the center of those tensions stood Prince William. Sources close to royal operations claim William had become increasingly focused on long-term institutional survival, particularly regarding the future roles of George, Charlotte, and Louis. The pressure surrounding him had reportedly changed in recent years. Friends allegedly noticed a more guarded, strategic side emerging beneath his public calm. Because unlike previous generations, William was preparing his children for a monarchy, facing not only political scrutiny, but cultural exhaustion, internal division, and relentless public pressure from every direction. That growing urgency reportedly brought Princess Anne even closer to William's inner circle. For decades, Anne had been viewed as one of the monarchy's most disciplined and dependable figures, someone trusted precisely because she avoided drama. But insiders now suggest her influence quietly expanded as concerns about institutional weakness deepened. Sources claim Anne became increasingly vocal about preserving royal structure before irreversible damage could occur. To her supporters, she represented stability and clarity during an era dominated by uncertainty. To her critics, however, her growing influence allegedly created frustration inside factions aligned more closely with Queen Camilla's supporters. Palace whispers describe mounting discomfort among those who feared Anne's alliance with William could slowly shift the balance of influence away from older royal networks that had spent years consolidating their position around the king. What made matters even more sensitive was Prince Edward's reported involvement in confidential conversations surrounding royal continuity. Though often underestimated publicly, Edward has long been viewed by insiders as deeply trusted within the institution itself. Several royal observers now claim he quietly supported discussions centered on preserving Prince Philip's traditional values through the younger heirs. And while no official confirmation ever emerged, palace staff allegedly began noticing subtle changes in behavior among senior household figures. Meetings became more private. Certain advisors were excluded from discussions they once routinely attended. Invitations shifted. Old alliances that had remained stable for decades reportedly started breaking apart beneath the surface, replaced by new loyalties shaped less by rank and more by shared fears about what the monarchy could become if internal divisions continued growing unchecked. The deeper this struggle became, the more dangerous the symbolism surrounding Louis appeared. Because this was never simply about a child receiving recognition, it was about which vision of the monarchy would survive the next generation. One rooted in tradition, sacrifice, and quiet endurance. Or one shaped by modern influence, public image, and shifting political survival. And as palace insiders quietly chose sides, another explosive detail allegedly began resurfacing from the past, one connected directly to Prince Philip himself. But the real storm began when attention turned toward a forgotten conversation Prince Philip reportedly had years before his death, a conversation now resurfacing at the worst possible time. Long before the current royal tensions reached public view, Prince Philip reportedly worried about whether future generations would possess the discipline necessary to protect what he once called the monarchy's sacred responsibility. According to whispers from former royal staff and historians close to the late Duke's circle, Philip believed strength was rarely loud. It was measured through sacrifice, restraint, and an understanding that duty must always come before comfort, even inside one's own family. Those beliefs shaped nearly every part of his life. Behind his famously sharp public image was a man obsessed with endurance, structure, and survival. He had lived through war, public scrutiny, private heartbreak, and decades of institutional pressure without abandoning the rigid principles he believed kept the monarchy standing during its darkest moments. And now, according to growing speculation inside royal circles, some believe those same principles are quietly returning through Prince Louis in ways few initially expected. Former aides and royal commentators have increasingly revisited stories about Philip's relentless emphasis on military discipline and emotional control. He reportedly viewed weakness, not emotional vulnerability, but lack of purpose, as one of the greatest threats facing modern institutions. To Philip, the monarchy could never survive if it became consumed by image, popularity, or internal self-interest. That mindset allegedly left a profound mark on Princess Anne, who spent years observing her father's approach to royal duty firsthand. Insiders now claim Anne's growing protectiveness over Louis's future role stems from more than family affection. It comes from fear. Fear that the monarchy's older foundations are slowly eroding beneath newer generations, raised in an entirely different world, one dominated by public approval, endless commentary, and constant pressure to perform rather than serve. That fear reportedly intensified after Prince Philip's death, when private conversations about continuity became more urgent inside the palace. Royal historians suggest several senior figures quietly began searching for younger royals who embodied qualities Philip once respected most: resilience, independence, discipline, and emotional steadiness under pressure. And according to observers increasingly fascinated by Louis's role within the family dynamic, the youngest Wales child unexpectedly became part of that conversation. While the public largely viewed him through moments of youthful humor and spontaneity, insiders allegedly noticed something deeper beneath the surface. They saw confidence that did not rely on attention, a natural comfort within royal settings without visible calculation, traits that older palace figures reportedly interpreted as echoes of Philip's early energy before decades of royal responsibility hardened him into one of the institution's most uncompromising guardians. Speculation surrounding the patronage only intensified those interpretations. Royal commentators now suggest the symbolic choice may have been carefully designed to represent continuity of tradition during a time of growing uncertainty. Every detail surrounding the alleged decision appeared loaded with meaning. The timing, the secrecy, the involvement of Princess Anne and Prince William, even the language reportedly used during confidential discussions centered around legacy, service, and protection. For some within the institution, the message seemed unmistakable. The monarchy was preparing itself for survival long before the public realized how fragile internal stability had become. At the same time, media fascination surrounding Prince Louis began evolving into something far more serious than harmless curiosity. Quiet conversations emerged, questioning whether the palace was witnessing the rise of what some commentators dramatically labeled the next royal enforcer, a figure who could eventually embody the monarchy's older traditions during a future era of instability. That growing attention reportedly alarmed William and Catherine, who became increasingly protective of their children's public futures as speculation intensified around their long-term roles. Because inside royal life, symbolism can quickly become expectation, and expectation can become pressure powerful enough to reshape an entire generation. Yet as admiration around Prince Louis quietly grew, another reality emerged behind palace walls, one that threatened to turn a symbolic honor into a full-scale royal power struggle. It is now whispered in the highest royal circles that the patronage announcement sparked more than emotional reactions, it triggered strategic calculations. According to palace administrative murmurs, senior figures began reassessing who truly held influence over the monarchy's next chapter. And while no public confrontation ever surfaced, Insiders claim the atmosphere inside royal residences became colder, more cautious, and increasingly divided between those loyal to tradition and those determined to modernize the institution at any cost. What once appeared to outsiders as a stable royal machine allegedly became something far more fragile behind closed doors, a silent struggle between competing visions of survival. Because within the monarchy, power is rarely seized through dramatic declarations. It shifts quietly, through meetings no one admits happened, through invitations that suddenly disappear, through carefully chosen symbols capable of changing the future without a single public announcement. According to royal insiders, the weeks following the patronage discussions were marked by intensified behind-the-scenes meetings involving Princess Anne and Prince William. Advisors reportedly moved between private residences at unusual hours, while long-term planning conversations became increasingly guarded. Even experienced palace staff allegedly struggled to understand who was truly directing certain discussions anymore. Some sources claimed the urgency surrounding those meetings grew directly from fears about institutional instability during King Charles's reign. Others believed the deeper concern centered around succession planning not legally, but symbolically. Because while the crown follows constitutional order, influence inside the monarchy often depends on something far more unpredictable: public trust, internal alliances, and the ability to embody continuity during moments of uncertainty. That was where Prince Louis's growing symbolic role reportedly became impossible to ignore. Royal aides were allegedly reviewing future ceremonial responsibilities for younger family members with unusual intensity, searching for ways to strengthen long-term public confidence in the Wales generation. And according to several palace observers, discussions surrounding Louis increasingly focused on the idea that he could someday represent the kind of old-school royal image Prince Philip once embodied. Not flashy, not politically performative, but disciplined, resilient, and institution-first. For supporters of that vision, Louis symbolized a return to traditional monarchy values at a time when many feared the institution had drifted dangerously close to becoming reactive rather than steady. Yet for others inside royal circles, that growing symbolism created deep anxiety. Sources close to Queen Camilla's allies reportedly feared the rise of this narrative could gradually weaken their influence over how the monarchy's future story would be shaped. Palace insiders claim frustration quietly intensified among figures who believed modernization, not rigid tradition, was the monarchy's only path to survival in a rapidly changing world. To them, reviving Prince Philip's institutional mindset through the younger generation risked pulling the monarchy backward at the exact moment it needed adaptability. What made the situation even more delicate was King Charles himself. According to whispers from within palace operations, Charles allegedly attempted to calm tensions while carefully balancing loyalty between competing factions surrounding him. But balancing loyalty inside the monarchy has always come at a personal cost, especially when the conflict involves family, legacy, and fears about what history will ultimately remember. As speculation deepened, media insiders reportedly noticed unusual secrecy surrounding upcoming royal planning discussions. Press briefings became shorter. Public schedules shifted unexpectedly. Conversations about future ceremonial roles were allegedly redirected or quietly denied altogether. Even veteran royal correspondents began suspecting something larger was unfolding beneath the polished surface of official appearances. Because by that stage, this was no longer simply about one patronage or one child. It had evolved into something far more consequential, a battle over identity itself, over whether the monarchy's future would be guided by continuity with its oldest traditions or reshaped entirely through modern influence and strategic reinvention. And as the divisions widened behind palace walls, one uncomfortable reality became impossible to avoid. But the deeper truth behind this patronage was never simply about Prince Louis. It was about who would ultimately define the monarchy after King Charles's reign finally comes to an end. By the time the dust began settling, the patronage itself had become far larger than a ceremonial royal assignment. According to royal observers, it evolved into a symbol of something the monarchy fears losing most: continuity. In a palace increasingly divided by competing visions, public scrutiny, and private anxieties over the future, Prince Louis unexpectedly emerged as part of a deeper conversation about legacy, endurance, and the survival of traditions built long before he was born. What once seemed like a quiet institutional gesture now carried the emotional weight of an entire dynasty, struggling to define itself before history does it for them. Because beneath the polished statements and carefully measured appearances, insiders reportedly understood something the public was only beginning to sense: the monarchy was entering one of the most delicate transitions of the modern royal era. Publicly, the patronage was framed as a respectful tribute honoring Prince Philip's enduring legacy. Palace language remained cautious, dignified, and restrained. But behind closed doors, according to figures close to royal operations, the decision allegedly carried far deeper meaning. It was not only about remembering the late Duke of Edinburgh, it was about preserving the philosophy he represented. Duty before comfort, institution before ego, stability before applause. And as rumours surrounding the internal tensions continued spreading through royal circles, one figure repeatedly surfaced at the centre of the story: Princess Anne. Quiet, disciplined, and fiercely protective of the crown's long-term survival, Anne was increasingly viewed by insiders as the silent architect behind the entire movement, not because she sought power for herself, but because she reportedly feared what could happen if the monarchy lost its sense of purpose during a time of growing instability. At the same time, Prince William and Princess Catherine became more closely associated with the idea of preserving institutional stability for the next generation. Their public image had always balanced modern family life with royal responsibility, but insiders now claim the pressure surrounding them had intensified dramatically behind the scenes. Every decision involving George, Charlotte, and Louis reportedly carried enormous symbolic weight. The Wales family was no longer seen simply as the future of the monarchy; they were becoming its emotional centre during an era marked by uncertainty, illness, division, and shifting loyalties. And among the three children, Louis unexpectedly became the figure generating the most fascination precisely because he was never expected to stand at the centre of such serious conversations. That unpredictability made the symbolism even more powerful. Royal commentators increasingly described the monarchy as standing at a dangerous crossroads between modern celebrity and traditional duty. One path embraced constant reinvention, media strategy, and public relatability in order to survive changing cultural expectations. The other insisted the monarchy could only endure if it remained rooted in discipline, sacrifice, and emotional restraint, the very values Prince Philip spent decades defending, often at enormous personal cost. According to palace whispers, the growing attention surrounding Louis represented more than curiosity about a young royal child. It represented a deeper public hunger for continuity during uncertain times, a desire to believe the institution still possessed figures willing to carry the burden of responsibility rather than simply inherit privilege. That is why several royal insiders now quietly claim this moment may someday be remembered as a subtle but defining turning point in Windsor history. Not because of a dramatic public scandal or constitutional crisis, but because of what it revealed beneath the surface. The alliances shifting behind palace walls, the fears surrounding King Charles's reign, the quiet emergence of Princess Anne as a guardian of Philip's institutional vision, and the unexpected rise of Prince Louis as a symbol in a battle over what the monarchy should become once the current era finally ends. And as palace lights dimmed behind the ancient walls of Windsor, one unsettling realization reportedly lingered among those closest to the crown: the future of the monarchy may already be quietly taking shape in the hands of the child no one expected. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.